Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another Enable Bootcamp today, cybersecurity for low risk clients. Just to get the legalese out of the way, if we make any forward looking statements during today's session, take it with a grain of salt. Final form, function, and delivery dates may change. For anybody that this is the first time joining us on a bootcamp or in the office hours, I'm Lewis Pope, one of the head nerds at Enable. My focus is on security. My background is from the MSP space, took the break fix journey up to full managed services over about 6 years. I've been with Enable for the past five. I'm an SSCP, so my security training and certifications are all relevant to practical implementation of security control, so the in the trenches work of it all. But I am working on my CISSP. So I'm a good resource for you whenever it comes to security best practices, security baselining, things like that. So feel free to reach out to me anytime. So today's boot camp, this is only a primer boot camp. There is no way in the world we could fit everything you need to know about security for low risk environments into a single 2 hour boot camp. It would probably take 6 or 8 hours. So this is going to be condensed. We're going to be covering a lot of stuff. There's some things we're not going to be able to get very deep into, but we are going to touch on a lot of the common controls. Um, and what we're going to be covering today is going to be important parts of security baselines for any organization out there, regardless of their risk level or risk tolerance. But yeah, this is only the starting point. Good cybersecurity practices are going to require ongoing risk management and a lot of effort that is never ending, always evolving, and sometimes just unappreciated. So, with that, this is a slog and we got a lot to get through. We're going to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to try to get everything within the 2 hour limit we have today. But again, feel free, ask questions, probe me to talk a little bit deeper about specific things if you think you need it. Today's boot camp is going to be referenced against a couple of common popular frameworks and standards. Um, these are the frameworks that were referenced to generate this boot camp. And while using the slides and everything we're putting together today for educational purposes and for getting you up to speed, is use the original source documents for all of these standards and frameworks if you're going to follow any of them. They are constantly updated. There is plenty more verbose description and tons of templates and work already done for each respective framework or standard we're looking at on the screen right now. So again, don't hesitate. Go out and grab the original documents, the original sources. They're all free. You shouldn't have to pay for any of these to obtain the original frameworks themselves and their supporting documentation that was produced with them. And the reason why we're here talking about security is, well, the MSP model is evolving. It used to be that 8, 10, 15 years ago, the MSP model was uptime projects, MRR, recurring monthly for maybe help desk or patching or AV licenses and backup. And you can make the sales on hardware. But the MSP market has matured, the demands have changed, and now successful MSPs are are still doing everything we've previously been doing as MSPs, but they are now moving towards risk mitigation and offering their services from a security first delivery viewpoint. MSPs are now becoming replacements for virtual CISOs or chief information officers, chief information security officers. If you've been to any conference recently, you have seen more than one virtual CIO, CSO offering out there. MSPs are beginning to become that for their clients more so than ever before. and the need to be business consultants and help with the business transformation of your clients is becoming a more prominent ask of the clients of MSPs. And also, disaster recovery and business continuity is now becoming more and more of a given of this is what you are delivering to your clients. And we'll get into each one of these, some of these as we go through today's session. And we're going to start out though with a few just centering statements and why we're going through this process, why it helps to have this knowledge available to you, not just so you have the knowledge so you can talk about it, but so that you have the knowledge to plan and design and build out your services that you offer. So first, it's about the importance of risk identification and risk ownership. That is what MSPs are now being sought out for, to assist with managing the risk of a client in relation to their IT infrastructure. And one of the very first challenges that you're going to run into is risk is scary. If something is scary, people will avoid it and they'll hide from it. So you're going to see that manifested in a few ways. You're going to see that disguised as optimism and naivety. You may have a client or a prospect that just says, I want to focus on growth to the detriment of security. Or you may hear, we're too small to worry about those kinds of risks. There is no reason for someone to target us with ransomware. Those are all common objections you're going to hear. And one that is absolutely a red flag for me personally is we don't want to know because then we have to do something. If you have a client that, and I have had these before myself, where they are almost combative to the point of being made aware of the problems in their environment, their security deficiencies, they may outright tell you, I do not want to know. That is a red flag for me. That means that client may not necessarily be a good match for a security focused MSP going forward. Not saying kick them to the curb, because you know what, you have contracts that need to be supported, the bills have to be paid, but it is definitely a flag to consider if you do have clients like this. They just simply may not be a good match. Another challenge is qualifying and quantifying risks. And this is the fact that being able to look out towards the horizon and foresee the possible complications that might arise because of the way a business operates is a skill that not all business owners are going to have at their disposal. Not every business owner is a good business owner. This may mean that your understanding of your client's business operations may be better than theirs. And that's going to aid you whenever it comes time to translate computer problems into business impact with a dollar amount attached. Because you, as the IT professional in the room, you can connect the dots fairly quickly in your head to understand why something is a problem, but you are going to have to translate that into a practical business impact or a workflow impact for your clients. And a easy, simple way of understanding this is if you have a client with QuickBooks, if they're only backing up once a week, that's going to be a problem if they don't have a paper trail to assist with reentry of lost data. So if you know that, if you know something like that isn't a problem, make the client own it, bring it up to them, put it in a risk register, put it in a risk acceptance letter, get their signature on it. And I'll be talking about risk registers a little bit more in the session, but this qualifying and quantifying the risk is what is going to help you, one, understand what you are dealing with, but also being able to present the value proposition to your clients, why you are there, what you are going to help protect them against, what you're going to reduce their exposure to. A third challenge is going to be controlling the risk narrative. Who are your clients listening to? And you need to be the professional in the room guiding the conversation about cybersecurity and risk for your clients, because if you're not doing it, they're listening to someone else. And if you're not part of your client's discussions about business risks, which include those IT infrastructure and a cybersecurity risk that you're responsible for, you know, then you can't influence their decision making. And with that, do you have the capability and the information to influence their decision making? You're going to need to monitor and be aware of what is happening in the industry of the verticals that your clients are in. If you have a ton of retail clients, there's not going to be a lot there for you to be able to take advantage of as far as a vertical. But get into medical, lawyers, uh, get into accountants, then there's going to be many, many opportunities for you to stay aware of what is happening in that client's vertical and bring to their attention their new regulations or their new obligations that they may be under due to changes in standards or legislation. Is that hard? Is that a challenge? Yes. But if you're able to bring it to your clients, you're going to be in a better position than if they waiting for the client to figure it out and then bringing it to you, or worse, taking it to someone else as a problem to solve. Uh, Challenge. Fourth is transference of risk. And one of the types of risk mitigation is to transfer the burden or the risk of consequences to a third party. Many clients may assume their relationships with you under a managed services agreement constitutes a transference of their risk concerning data and IT to you. It's important to dissuade them of any false assumptions they're going to have there, because clients are absolutely horrible in the MSP space for assuming that you take care of the computers, therefore it's your fault when something goes wrong. Whenever in reality, what they're concerned with was never within the scope of your managed services agreement. You never agreed to take care of it. They never agreed to pay you money in exchange for you to take care of it. You may have even proposed it to them, but they brushed it off. So you need to make sure that your clients are in good understanding of what it is you are and are not taking care of for them. Another assumption you'll hear is, if we get hit by a ransomware attack, you'll help us recover from it since it was your job to stop it in the first place. If you have never had a conversation with your clients about what the response to a ransomware attack is going to look and feel like, this might be an assumption they have, and you're going to be 10 hours in, 15 hours in, 25 hours in to responding to a ransomware attack, getting them rebuilt and back up and running, and you're already getting pushback from them about the cost. Why am I having to pay this much? Wasn't it your responsibility in the first place? So that's another transference of risk where they are attempting to transfer the cost of that risk off to you instead of them having to take that cost themselves. Another one, we don't have to worry about cyber hygiene or awareness. That's why we are paying you to protect us. You need your clients to participate in good cybersecurity practices just as much as they need you to implement the security controls that are going to help them. It's like non-compliant patients. If you have a non-compliant patient that's not going to take their medication, the work that a doctor or a nurse is going to do for them is only going to be so effective. The same applies in the MSP space with clients. You're providing the medicine, but if they don't take it, if they don't practice healthy lifestyles, it's only going to be so effective, if not counterproductive. Another red flag is there's no need for us to change how we run our business. This one is a red flag for me because if a client is not willing to make process modifications to their business to make their business operations more secure, you're going to have to put so many compensating mitigations in place that you may not have otherwise had to do, which makes security more complicated than what it needs to be. And then the final challenge we have up here as an example, it's one of your responsibilities as an MSP is to discover, qualify, and quantify risk for your clients. It's not your role to accept risk on behalf of your clients. They have to make that decision themselves. Your role there is to discover risk, record those risks, translate them into business risk that the client can understand, give clients that final decision on if they want to implement risk mitigation strategies against whatever that risk is via avoidance, reduction, transference, or acceptance. Get it on paper, and you're going to be getting that on paper in the form of risk registers or risk acceptance letters. And that's going to require buy-in from your C-suites and your boards and your chairs of boards and owners and presidents. You can work with ops managers, office managers for day-to-day security best practices, but you need whoever is on the top of the food chain at your client agreeing to and signing off on the risk mitigation measures that are put in place for their business. And this might mean that you have to start qualifying clients, disqualifying clients and prospects that don't want to get on board on this. That's a whole conversation I know that you've probably heard many times about when it's time to fire clients, so we're not going to rehash that today. But it is one of those challenges that as you mature and grow what you're doing around security, you may find that your services outgrow what your clients are consuming. And that is just a clear indicator that you need to look for and acquire new clients that can consume those new services at whatever new margins you're looking to make. But in the end, the big thing to take away is that clients need to accept and own their business risks, not the MSP. So if you come across something, it needs to be documented, quantified, and the client needs to be the one taking ownership over it, not you just simply saying, well, I see this problem. I know they don't have the budget to fix it. They're going to tell me no, so I'm not even going to bring it up with them. You can't make that decision on their behalf. You have to give them that information and give them the opportunity to make that decision. So it's them owning whatever that liability, vulnerability, or risk is. So also dealing with security reticent clients. This could be a whole 2 hours of a boot camp within this, but just a few points of leverage public messaging from figures of authority, such as Department of DHS, CISA, and other recognized and respected sources. You can also check out Market Builder. We've got some pre-built content over there. Aligning your messaging so that it is aligned with the messaging from trusted third parties, and that can help avoid the perception of you as the MSP just trying to sell a bill of goods to a client. It's like, no, we are aligning our services to meet what these guidelines and standards are already saying are best practices and that you should be doing as a business. And being able to say that, well, we are following those defined best practices that align with that public messaging that's already out from figures of authority or entities of trust. It gives you a viable backstop for a minimum viable package of services where you're able to say, this is the minimum of what we offer and we do not deviate from it. Also, a little bit of extra here, if you can, demonstrating how the services you provide align to those best practices can help out in conversations with clients and prospects. And also, institute a all clients going forward approach. So once you have an updated security program in the works or in place, all your new clients move forward with that. You move the old clients into that model that you can, and the clients that are, dragging their feet or don't want to make that transition, they go into that conversation about, do I need these clients anymore or not? So risk registers as sales tools and a CYA. So this is my secret sauce for a lot of things from the security side of viewing things. A risk register is very popular in enterprise and larger businesses. It is almost a requirement for any type of good governance in a large business. And a risk register can provide a single source of truth for documenting and tracking identified risks across a business. And it doesn't have to just be IT risks, but for our purposes today, that's what we're going to treat it as. Again, common in larger organizations. It is great for designating who owns a risk, and with the relationship between MSPs and their clients, most of that risk ownership is probably going to go back to the client in any of the instances where the client says, we're not going to fix this. Well, if you're not going to fix it, that means you are accepting the risk. You're putting your name by it, not us. Each risk should list how it will be avoided, reduced, transferred, or accepted. So as you discover those deficiencies or those vulnerabilities in the client's environment that are not going to be addressed through the normal maintenance or the normal patching and updating of the environment, as you discover those vulnerabilities, get them written down, figure out what can be done to either reduce them, avoid them, transfer them, or accept them. Again, get that client signature at the end. And these can help show your clients that you are taking risk mitigation seriously. And this can be something that helps tilt a conversation in your favor. If you go to a client with just a bill of goods of your services of here's what I want you to buy from me, versus taking and listing out what the actual vulnerabilities in their environment are that you're going to be mitigating or remediating for them. It can help illustrate the value of what it is you're actually bringing, and also it makes it can make a client sit up a little bit straighter whenever you have all of this stuff written down and you're telling them that they're going to have to sign on the dotted line at the end saying, yep, you told me about all of this, now I know about it and it's my responsibility to do something about it. Whether that responsibility to do something about it is just to pay you to fix it, that's another conversation, but you still need them signing saying, this is my risk, you've told me about it, and I'm accepting it. And this may not be a good match for all clients. This technique kind of tiptoes in the fear, doubt, and uncertainty, uncertainty, and doubt realm. So don't feel like that's what it's for. Don't feel like that's the purpose of it as a sales tool. It is part of good governance. And for you as an MSP, it's a great CYA because, yep, I told you about this on this date. We offered to fix it. You said no. And this was why you said no, and you accepted the risk. So whatever happened because of that, you were warned about it. And if you do have clients that aren't a good match for this, well, you don't have to use it with them in the sense that you're going to present it to them and put it in front of them. They might be too combative for that. Understandable, smaller clients that are business owners that aren't used to being told how they should run their business, they may not appreciate these, but they are still a very valuable tool for you as the MSP to keep track of what is there, what's going on, what is known about, what is not known about, and figuring out who is responsible for it. So now we're going to get into the actual individual security controls. And as we get through these, you're going to see some common threads and common ways of grouping these together. And the way these are grouped together is we're going off of the assumption of first, we're starting out with the easiest things to do first. And we're going to be listing these out, these practices, these security controls. We're going to be listing them out kind of based on how common they are among those different frameworks we were referencing earlier. But we're going to start out with asset management, particularly hardware inventory. So for hardware inventory, why is it important? First is you can't defend what you don't know about. And this is a foundational building block of any security program, of any cybersecurity practice. You do not have this, you do not have a good cybersecurity program, because simply the fact you don't know about it, you can't defend it. Keeping track of assets, such as who has it and where it is, this can help out with preventing inventory control, loss of equipment. It can help with life cycle management. It helps with having the ability to satisfy audits, which computers with sensitive information are issued to which users. It can help maintain operational efficiency by making sure you're keeping proper equipment reserves. So if you are offering hardware as a service as an MSP, this can make sure that you've got the appropriate amount of reserve equipment available for your clients if you've standardized. And that can also help with reducing waste by not having an an unnecessarily large amount of equipment in reserve. This is also foundational to zero trust security. So the principle of zero trust is, trust nothing. Everything is an exception to the do not allow. You have to explicitly allow all actions that you want to happen. Well, if you're going to do that, you're going to need to know what equipment is out there, what assets exist, and who they are issued to. You can also streamline your vulnerability remediation and mitigation practices. It answers important questions like, there is an announcement on a Friday afternoon from your VPN appliance vendor that there is a critical severity that needs to be patched and updated. Well, is somebody on your team going to have to spend an hour and a half or 2 hours just figuring out which clients have that susceptible equipment or not? If an application, whether it's a VPN appliance or anything else, any other piece of equipment, that is time saved and resources that don't have to be consumed, which makes your teams more efficient, reduces their workloads. And this is a common control amongst all of the frameworks that we're referencing and standards. So the CIS, which is the Center for Internet Security, version 8 of it, it is 1.1. It is the very first control that is defined there. Same with NIST. It's one of the primary controls there. Same with a lot of the others in here. It is a primary building block. And all of them cover it in low risk environments. So for low risk environments, every one of these different security controls and frameworks say, yes, you need to perform hardware asset inventory management. But what exactly are they asking for there? And you're going to see this term used a lot today, or this phrase used a lot today, and it might be a little bit irritating, but it's kind of what I had to settle on. Otherwise, we would have to spend an hour talking about each one of these different control groupings. Create and maintain a list of all assets that can store or process data. You're going to have to do a lot of creating and maintaining of documentation, list, and processes. But you're going to need to know your servers, your IoT devices, network appliances, workstations, VoIP devices. You're going to need a list of all those assets. You're also going to need to know, you're going to need to have a process to address unauthorized devices in the network by, one, having a process to discover devices, a process to authorize devices whenever they are discovered, and a process for how you deal with unauthorized devices when they're discovered. And this needs to be a weekly action. Each one of the This is, again, kind of the distillation of the common things that every one of these different frameworks is asking for. And where can Enable help you here? Well, with Insight and Essential, the asset discovery of those products and platforms are going to allow you to be able to discover that information. And then the asset synchronization between Insight or Essential and MSP Manager or Passportal. That'll allow you to have a source of truth within either MSP Manager or inside of Passportal that lists your assets, who owns them, what their deployment date was, what their end of life or their end of support date is, whenever their warranty expires. That'll be all information you could keep somewhere like Passportal or MSP Manager. Asset management of software inventory. So why is it important to have software inventory? This is, again, common to all of the different frameworks, but why is it important? You need to know what vendors you have, which vendors you have the applications and software for, because you're going to need to know where to subscribe for security bulletins and status alerts from those vendors about important well, patches, updates, or other security warnings or news that you may need to know, so you can go apply that to those applications and software in your production environments. Having the contact information for vendor support. Is the software under a support contract? You can also, for the purposes of monitoring license consumption and use, this can allow you as an MSP to uncover lost revenue opportunities because a client is using more licenses than what are being paid for. You can uncover overspend for clients. So figure out whenever your clients have too many licenses. These can both help out with aiding in budgeting and projections for future costs, and can also aid in compliance for license use rights, which usually that's a concern for medium-sized and larger businesses. There's not that often that you're going to get a Microsoft audit for a 10-person business. Knowing which systems have what software also installed reduces your time to patch and mitigate. So again, it's Friday afternoon. An emergency security bulletin is put out by your line of business software for one of your clients. Details all the information for you, and luckily it says all you have to do is run this executable to update the product. Well, that's easy, and you could probably even automate it, but you still have the first challenge of, well, which one of my clients need this? Which one of my clients uses this line of business software? And without that central source of truth somewhere that you can go and look to find out if that application or that software is in use, then it becomes an active discovery. You're going to have to tag somebody on the team that has the capability of doing that discovery for you. And then they're going to have to spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, depending on how large your clients are, how many endpoints are under management, the skill level of the technician you have doing the work. It could be a non-unsubstantial amount of time they have to spend just finding the endpoints to patch in the first place. Track and plan end of life, end of support, other life cycle management. This can help you and your clients properly project budgeting. Don't get off guard, so you don't also get off guard whenever you're planning major projects. If you know you've got to do an upgrade of your clients from Office 2016 up to and now into M365, well, you're going to need to know, all right, I need to pull those old instances out. Where are they? Do I have documentation on hand that says we have to use this version for X reason? And also for combating shadow IT. These are all great things, all great benefits that you get out of software inventory and having one. And again, this is a set of security controls that almost every one of the frameworks that we're looking at today call for. The Exception here is going to be the HIPAA security rule. And the HIPAA security rule does not directly call for a software inventory to be maintained. Now, to achieve some of the other security controls that they are asking for, you're going to need a software asset inventory because it makes that job easier, but it doesn't mandate it. And you'll see as we go through some of these other collection of security controls, you'll see that there are certain frameworks, policies, standards that do not call for it. And we'll highlight those as we go through. So again, software inventory. What do the frameworks actually ask you to do? Well, they're all universally just asking for you to create and maintain a list of all software in the environment. Some will make the distinction between licensed software and all software. So what's applicable for your environment there is going to be based on, well, going and looking at those source frameworks that are applicable to your client's verticals and following them, what they ask for. They also ask that you record how software is deployed and the planned decommission date. And having that planned decommission date is great for your sales teams because they don't have to go, it's an opportunity they don't have to go and hunt for. It's already been planted in the client's perception that, hey, there is a decommission date for this piece of software because it's no longer going to be in support by the vendor. And once it is no longer in support by the vendor, it has to be updated in order for the MSP to be able, for the MSP to continue providing support, but also so you're making sure you're removing any future vulnerabilities through proper updating and staying away from unsupported versions. And that's the only supported software is authorized. So there's no reason why you should have a Windows XP machine in production environment nowadays. Of course, there is exceptions to unsupported software or operating systems. And whenever that happens, you just have to have the risk exception there, along with whatever your compensating controls are. So you have a client, they got a Windows XP box that's running a CNC machine. The client is not going to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to buy new equipment, new controllers, new interface boards to update a CNC machine that's working just fine. So your compensating measures there would be probably removing that equipment over into a segmented network so it is isolated from the rest of the production network, and probably even restricting its access to the internet, and it can only access other data storage locations in the environment to retrieve the CNC files that it needs. And that would be you implementing compensating controls to make up for the fact you're using a non-supported OS. Also, a process for removal of unauthorized software. And where can Enable help here? We're going to be able to help via Insight or Incentral because those are able to do asset inventory discovery on software. They can tell you what applications are installed on your endpoints and you can review those. You can also use them to monitor for software that you don't want in your environment or shouldn't be in your environments. So you as an MSP, you would be very concerned if a competitive RMM tool that you do not use all of a sudden shows up in your client's environments. You're going to want a heads up from that because that may be anything from potential client churn because the client has brought in your competition, or it could be early signs of intrusion from a threat actor via using legitimate using legitimate software to perpetrate an attack. We have those in the MSP in the automation cookbook already. If you're not familiar with the automation cookbook, we've got tons of pre-built scripts and tasks already out there. And one of them is competitive RMM solutions. We can monitor for those and alert you if they're found on an endpoint. Passportal and MSP Manager for their documentation functionality can also assist very well in this. Next, data protection. And this is about identifying and securing data more than it is about the backup and recovery of data. So this is going to be treated as two different sets of security controls. So why is it important? Well, if you don't know what data is being processed and stored and the type of data it is, you won't know what needs to be done with that data. And that's going to be for things like retention for legal compliance, how data has to be treated in transit and at rest, depending on the type of data it is. You're also going to need documentation and processes to help show that due care and due diligence is being followed in the environment whenever it comes to protection of data in regards to data privacy and security. It's very important whenever you're in e-discovery, because knowing where data is, what kind of data is there, where you can find it, and how to find it, very important in e-discovery. And it's also an important part of understanding how your client's business operates. Again, you as the IT professional in a lot of situations may understand how your client's business functions better than they do. And having a good, strong understanding of data flow and how that data is leveraged by the business, that's going to give you opportunities to make the clients more resilient by improving the security of that data, but it's also an opportunity for you to discover opportunities. And again, you'll see that all of the common, all of the frameworks that we referenced today, all of them call for something to be done with data protection. And again, this is not recovery, just protection and identification of data. And you'll see that some of these have a lot more references than the other. You're going to see that pattern develop. We have the CIS controls that are asking for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different sets of controls. Whereas if we look at the Cyber Essentials from the UK, there's only one section of the controls that talks about it. But if we look at the HIPAA security rule, there's tons. If we look at ISO 27001, there are tons. If we look at CGIS or PCI DSS, there are tons of individual controls that are referencing and talking about data privacy and security. So what do the frameworks call for? The common elements that all of those frameworks are asking for is that first, you're going to create and maintain data management processes and documentation. So data flow charts, who owns data, who processes the data, where's the data stored, how, and establishing that inventory of that data and updating it annually or more frequently. Being able to retain that data and dispose of data in accordance to whatever the data management process you develop dictates, which you're going to develop that based on the vertical and the standards that client's environment has to adhere to. And establishing access controls to data based on least privilege and need to know. Really simple example of that is you have a small client that has a file share set up. Even if everybody in that business needs access to that file share, everybody shouldn't have that file share mapped with a single set of admin credentials, because that was just a fast way of setting it up. Everybody needs their own unique credentials for accessing that file share, and the permissions that they have for accessing that file share should not be any greater than what is needed. You shouldn't be setting up a map drive on an end user's computer with a set of admin credentials that also have that's going to have valid privileges in other areas of the environment. Encryption of end user devices. This is a simple, easy one. This is BitLocker, what are your choice of drive encryption. And this is even called for in low risk environments. This used to be something that was considered more of a medium risk and high risk type control. Nowadays, it is more of it's included in low risk as well. It's easy to set up, configure, and monitor. compared to some of the other solutions. It's a lot less expensive, and it gives you tons and tons and tons of protection whenever it comes to accountability. If you've got if you have end user devices encrypted and you lose control of that device, and you can prove that device was encrypted at the time you lost control over it, that prevents so many additional phone calls that have to be made, so many additional claims that have to be filed in relation to a data breach, because you're able to confidently say, well, there wasn't a data breach here because the drive's encrypted and nobody's going to be able to get to that data. And Insight, Central, they're going to be able to help you here with the data discovery via automations and scripts. Passportal and MSP Manager can help with the documentation side and recording this information. And our risk intelligence solution is a individual tool that can help you find plain text, PII, credit card, debit card, social security numbers, sitting in plain text in an environment where they shouldn't be. So on to now secure configurations. So why are secure configurations important? Well, misconfigured systems are right behind unpatched vulnerabilities as vectors for threat actors. It is going to be misconfigured firewalls, web application firewalls, session timeouts, session key handling. Those are going to be all the places, all the things where a misconfiguration can allow an attacker to make an attack, to facilitate whatever actions they're going to take. So having control over those systems and the configuration of those systems can help prevent that. Also, it can help reduce configuration drift. And configuration drift brings unknowns. And configuration drift is just everything that happens from the time you set up an endpoint, set up a workstation, set up a network appliance, and just the modifications and the logins and the tweaking and the new updates that happen over time will eventually drift that configuration out of alignment with what was originally set up. Having secure configurations can help bring that back in line and be able to keep a handle on it. Environments with poor secure configurations also can experience poor performance. Imagine the risk of having an interface accessible to the internet or an RDP port, or having a VPN box that's not configured to split traffic correctly. All of those things can be performance impactors at the same time that they are also exposing unnecessarily an expanded attack surface. And sometimes it is the basics. And back to originally what we were talking about, the fact that we're doing this list of security controls in order from the easiest and the least expensive to implement for the most impact and up. This is secure configuration is one of those things that it doesn't cost you a license. It costs you planning, time, and the resources to implement. All right, a quick question on the risk intelligence. How do you prevent risk intelligence from downloading every file in OneDrive? Yep, so risk intelligence is going to perform a scan of an endpoint, and if there's a OneDrive on that endpoint and it tries to start scanning those linked files there, OneDrive's going to start downloading those files to make them available. Easiest way to get around that is to put in an exclusion inside of risk intelligence to ignore C:, users / wildcard / OneDrive wildcard. So being able to tell, ignore what's in this OneDrive location. Now, does that mean you can't use risk intelligence to scan that OneDrive folder and the data that's in there in that situation? Yep, but that's the solution for that specific type of situation if you have clients with large data sets in OneDrive that can't be downloaded locally to the device. And in that case, it is better to ignore it there and use Microsoft's DLP services to look for that type of sensitive data in the environment. So what are frameworks calling for around secure configuration? You'll see here that the CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, which is one of the certifications, one of the standards that you're going to have to meet and adhere to if you're going to win and maintain federal contracts in the future. It has tons of requirements there. Same with the CJIS. And CJIS will be familiar for anybody here that supports municipalities or county sheriffs or municipality or town police departments. They all call for quite a bit around it. But again, some of the other ones don't call for as much. And whenever we look at what those common things that are mostly being asked for across all of those different frameworks for low risk environments, it's going to be first is to create and maintain. I told you that create and maintain was going to show up a lot today. A process for secure configuration of authorized assets. So you need documentation in place for your client, for their environment, based on their assets, what their assets should be configured like. Create and maintain processes and documentation for their network appliances as well. Making sure that you have 15-minute idle timeout sessions set for any session across the board, and maybe even less for more sensitive logins. So that would be your idle timeout session for an RDP connection or an SSH connection, or for a TeamViewer or take control session, or the time that your timer for a endpoint to switch over to screensaver. Disabling default accounts is commonly asked for because that's one of the best practice first things you should do with any new equipment, any new software, is disable or remove the default accounts that are added when possible. Secure administrative access to authorized assets via SSH or other secure methods. Have them on their own management network if you can. Host-based firewall on servers, workstations, and other supported devices. This is something that is a hit or miss over the past couple of years on whether any given MSP I've ran into considered this to be vital and they made sure that it was turned on, or they kind of just honestly paid it no attention. But the purpose of having host-based firewalls on servers and workstations is to protect those devices within a network from other devices within the network. Your perimeter firewall and the net and the filter and the perimeter firewall and any DNS filtering or internet filtering that you have going on at the edge, well, that protects your network from the outside. It does not protect the individual endpoints from each other. So that's why making sure you have those enabled and they're up to date and they're configured correctly is important, because one compromised device in your environment is all an attacker needs. They can pivot from there. You do not want to make it, you want to make it as hard as possible for an attacker to pivot from that device. And local device firewalls is one of the best methods of doing that. So now user and privileged account management. Why is it important? So account management allows you to prevent privilege creep. If you are not managing accounts, and by managing accounts, ensuring that you have admin and management accounts are properly provisioned, that non-admin users don't have admin privileges, and with which they can compromise secure configuration of endpoints. You want to make sure that users don't hold on to capabilities and permissions that they don't need to perform their job function, because sometimes it's not about the fact that that user is going to screw something up because they have access. you're just statistically, you are increasing the chances of something going wrong if that user that has admin credentials still just happens to be the user that gets compromised in an attack. Proper account management also helps maintaining proper authorization and authentication to access data and assets. That's going to be very important in areas where you have privileged information or even having to mandate proper data flows or control of data. Proper account management also reduces threat actors' potential foothold locations. You will give an attacker fewer opportunities. You will give them less accounts to compromise that can then be used to pivot and further escalate their attacks. And it also makes it easier to lock down, rotate passwords, boot users out of sessions in response to an event whenever you have a good account management practices in place, such as if you had Azure AD or an identity management platform set up, an end user clicks on a phishing email. You don't think anything's happened, but you, with a good account management process and tools in place, it's trivial for you to boot that user out of all of their currently logged in sessions everywhere and force them to have to re-log in with new valid credentials, depriving potentially a threat actor from the successful use of the credentials that they have. And which frameworks are calling for it? All of the frameworks are calling for it in varying depths and degrees of complexity. And again, these are all just in regards to low risk environments. And specifically, what are the common things they are asking for? They want you to create and maintain a list of all user accounts, and with most of them giving a preference to accounts that have privileged access. So your admin accounts, your accounts to bank accounts, to other sensitive portals or data. They mandate the use of unique, sufficiently complex passwords and MFA when available. You as an MSP, though, it is easy to dictate that out. You should follow best practices, but if you do not make it conducive for an end user to follow best practices, they are likely not to follow best practices. That's where Enable can come in and help out with our Passportal solution by giving you a password manager that the end users can use, so you can help encourage those good behaviors of not reusing passwords, sufficiently long and complex passwords. Disable accounts that are idle after 45 days. This would be something you could do through N-Central or Insight for your endpoints or AD, being able to monitor that if a account on a device, whether it's a domain account or a local account, has been idle for more than 45 days, disabling or removing that account from the endpoint. And restricting admin permissions and processes to dedicated administrator accounts. This is a common ask throughout all of the frameworks. And the simple example of that is just you don't use the domain enterprise admin account for regular work. There's no reason to log into that highly privileged of an account just to come in and change somebody's email settings or to change somebody's share permissions. And that's a very privileged account, and you shouldn't be using it unless you have to. Same for the day-to-day workflows for you and your technicians. There's no reason why your techs should have admin accounts for their endpoints unless they actually really need them. And if they do need them, well, they need that admin account in their regular user account. And there should be out in the automation cookbook a script for monitoring the age of accounts on an endpoint. Check that out. If it's not in there, feel free to reach out to me after today's session and let me know. and it might be something that I can just cook up for you, or honestly, I may already have it available somewhere else. So next is access control. So why is access control important? Well, this is to make sure that only authorized individuals have access to data or business processes that they need access to. This can help prevent malicious, intentional loss or control over data. It can also help prevent non-intentional data leakage. And also it helps with combating authorization and permissions creep. So, users having access to things they no longer need to have access to. And it's mainly around, again, the processes here of how you do it, less so than it is a single solution that you're going to use. This, again, is going to be something that's called for in different ways in every one of these frameworks. There is some commonality throughout all of them, and it's going to be these kind of this collection of controls right here. First is, again, that create and maintain a process for authorizing and granting access to assets. Also, the flip of that, create and maintaining process for revoking authorization and access to assets. So that's your onboarding, offboarding process for new hires at a client. All web portals or other publicly exposed resources must enable MFA. You need MFA or other secure methods for connecting to a VPN or access to remote assets. And all admin accounts, regardless of them being local, cloud, whatever it may be, all privileged admin accounts need to have MFA enabled. And this is, again, where Insight and N-central and Passportal for documentation side, N-central and Insight for configuration and monitoring side of some of these things. Then there's vulnerability management. This is going to be one of those where every one of the controls is probably going to have something to say about it. But of course, why is it important? I'm hoping none of this is going to be new for anybody here. But unpatched vulnerabilities, they are the primary vectors for threat actors to leverage. Removing them in a timely manner reduces your time of exposure. And that's just going back to most successful attacks that occur because of a vulnerability. That vulnerability was patched or had mitigations available for it for weeks or months or sometimes even years prior to an attacker exploiting that vulnerability. And the shorter the window presented to threat actors, you're playing the statistics. It's going to be a lower chance that a threat actor will leverage any given vulnerability if vulnerabilities are being addressed in a timely manner. But of course, dealing with vulnerabilities, it never reaches a complete state. It is a defined process that you have to keep on top of and always be executing on. Vulnerability scans, though, they help you find obvious deficiencies that can be remediated before they're exploited. And this gets back into, general awareness. If you don't know that your windows, if you don't check that your windows are locked, how do you know they're locked? If you're not checking to make sure that your applications or your endpoints are being patched, if you're not monitoring it, how do you know? And all of our frameworks, they all mention the need for vulnerability management in different ways at different levels. The Essential 8 from Australia is a fairly generic statement about patching applications and patching operating systems and doing it in a timely manner. Doesn't give you a lot of guidance on how you should execute that, how you should deliver on it, what your SOP for it should be. It just simply says you should do it. And you'll see that that's going to happen a lot as you take some of these frameworks or these standards and you start researching them and start reading them. You'll see that there are some things they just tell you to do it, but give you no guidance on how you should do it. But what are those common asks between these controls? The common asks are creating and maintaining a vulnerability management process. Again, back to that create and maintain thing. How do you create and maintain a vulnerability management process? Well, you have to have your documentation, your processes for back to my asset inventory for the assets that I have. How do I manage the vulnerabilities on them concerning hardware? How do I manage vulnerabilities on them concerning the operating system? How do I manage vulnerabilities on them concerning applications via patching, via updating? How do I deal with vulnerabilities on that endpoint concerning misconfiguration? That all goes into it. And you also are going to want to, they also call for risk-informed remediation processes. So that back to that process and documentation, that for your assets, you have risk-informed actions of we are going to do X for workstations and we're going to do Y for line of business software in order to patch them, update them, make them secure, and remove vulnerabilities from the environment. Monthly, they all call for monthly or more frequent application of patches for operating systems and software. Some of them explicitly will make mention of 15 days for critical vulnerabilities. That's whenever you're getting down into the CGIS or the CMMC, particularly the CMMC framework, because it is pointing itself back into the NIST 800 171 and NIST 853 and some other NIST references that dictate that all critical vulnerabilities should be addressed within 15 days. Where are we going to help you with that? At N-Central. So with N-Central, with Insight, you have patch management. That's going to trivialize and facilitate making patching of your endpoints for workstations and servers fairly straightforward. And you'll be able to institute some best practices there to help you, again, adhere and meet and hopefully exceed what your chosen framework is asking for. So if it says that you need to make sure that criticals are applied within 15 days, well, do we just kind of conglomerate everything together and we don't bother trying to figure out whether something is critical or not? We just make the decision of all systems are going to be patched and updated on a recurring basis every Friday and Saturday if your client's environments can tolerate that. And the way you deal with it is you simply review your pending patches that are pending for installation. Now, if you're going to be patching Fridays and Saturdays, you review them on Thursdays and make adjustments if needed. One possible way of doing it. There's tons of ways of how you set up the scheduling, how you review them, how you plan it out, which systems do you patch first, which systems do you patch second. But the end goal of having any available patches that are security updates that are available applied within X number of days, that's fairly easy to set up with the N-Central or Insight with our patch management engines. And if that's one of the things you have challenges on or you need help with, check out we do have some patching boot camps. Some are already recorded and in the MSP Institute, and we're also having updated versions of those coming up soon. And again, Passportal is going to be in here because it has a documentation solution. It can be a way for your SOPs and your manuals and your playbooks and your tailored and customized operating procedures for individual clients. It can be a place for those all to live. Log management. Now, this is one of those things that depending on the MSP you talk to, this might be something that they're really concerned with and they're always on top of it, or maybe something they never even touch. So mileage is going to vary here today on what your familiarity with taking advantage of logs looks like. But in general, log management is going to be important for you because, well, you don't know what happened without logs. And auditors aren't going to know what happened without logs. They give you the ability to answer many of the what happened questions you're going to get from clients. I know whenever I was with my MSP, there were many times where something happened, something broke, and I could fix it, no problem, but I had no way of telling the client why it broke or when it broke. Logs help you do this. It can also, having good logs can reduce your mean time to resolve issues because you have access to quality data. It makes engineers and technicians' lives so much easier whenever there are reliable logs and they know where they are and where they can collect them and use them. And also, it's maybe just a compliance requirement to have logging enabled or centralized management and collection of logs. This is one of those controls where it starts breaking down, though, on what is being asked for by specific security controls. There by specific frameworks. There are some in here that will not make any reference to log management or collecting logs or setting up for logs. It might imply that you're going to need to do that in order to achieve another goal, but they're not calling it out directly. Essential 8 is one of those where there's not a specific control that says log management or enable logging. It's kind of buried in there as a, yeah, if I'm going to do that, I'm going to need logging. Same with Cyber Essentials. It's in there, it's buried, but it's not like a headline item in the security controls. So what are those common security controls for? Log management and low risk client environments. You're still going to have that baseline requirement that's being asked over and over again: create and maintain a log management process that documents what logs are required, how long they should be kept, and where they should be stored. And making sure that whatever that logging is appropriate and enabled across all your assets, and that wherever these logs are being collected and sent to the aggregator for these logs, that you have proper storage, proper secured storage, and enough storage to satisfy what your retention is for those logs. And this can be something as simple as enabling installing syslog, installing syslog on your Windows devices and enable them and telling them to dump all of their logs to a on-site collector. Or it could be satisfied in ways by having a SIM solution or having an EDR solution with high fidelity telemetry and analytics recording of what happened on endpoints throughout the day. And Insight and Essential, they're great for enabling these enabling logging features on endpoints, deploying logging solutions, as well as setting up defaults for enabling local audit logging on devices. Email and web browser controls. So why is this important? Well, email and browsers, they're the primary vehicles through which many user-initiated threats occur. It's popular with threat actors for that very reason. It is a way for you to deliver a malware package directly to the doorstep of a user. Since these are, again, the primary vectors through which most end users are exposed to these types of threats, we need to have security controls in place there to mitigate that risk. So this is what our different frameworks are calling for. So you'll see that this is actually a little bit smaller than some of those others. Whenever we're looking at access control, there are multiple references in multiple different frameworks to how access control works. But here it's a lot more slimmed down. It's a lot of you should do it statements. It's a lot of having proper software controls in place that you're already doing as part of your other controls you're implementing. And one of the ones that are called out here is the HIPAA security rule. Again, not that you shouldn't be doing it in HIPAA environments that are subject to HIPAA security rules, but it's not called out as a mainline item there. It is a sub item. So what do these frameworks call for? What's common in the low risk environments? They are asking for a content filter. Some of them are asking for a DNS filter, and other ones are asking for other solutions, but they're just saying you need a method in place to protect assets from malicious websites and traffic, and they're leaving it up to you to decide how you're going to do that. But all of them call for these, using currently supported and up-to-date web browsers and email clients. And with that, there is that only use supported, but that also means authorized. So making sure that your clients are only using the browsers that they should be using, making sure that they aren't using extensions on their browsers if you have that capability and that interest in diving that deep. Even though it's not called for explicitly for low risk environments, something you can do, add additional value to your services. And again, enable Insight and Essential, they're going to give you the ability to be able to make sure that your browsers and your email clients are up to date. And then we have DNS filter or content filtering inside of Insight that's going to give you your ability to filter network and internet traffic on endpoints. So malware defenses and continuous monitoring. This is going to be probably what the majority of the expectations around what security is having an endpoint protection solution in place or a EDR in place or an AV in place in order to stop malware. And well, it's not unreasonable to put a lot of weight and expectation on malware defenses because, well, malware is one of the primary challenges being faced today by businesses in regard to cybersecurity. This is definitely a situation where an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Everything you can do to improve the malware defenses of your environments is, stacking the deck in your favor so that you're reducing the likelihood that you are going to suffer from a threat being successfully executed against an environment. But there's also business benefits for you as an MSP. A quality endpoint security solution can reduce your support ticket queue and improve other KPIs because of improving the detection efficacy of how often threats are being caught. But an EDR solution can even add on to that by not only having a better efficacy rate when it comes to detecting threats, but also facilitating making it easy for you to apply remediations to that threat without having to script it or devote substantial technician or engineer time or instant responder time to creating those mitigations. A good modern EDR solution is going to have automations within it to help you apply remediations, if not outright automatically at the push of a button. This can also help clients satisfy their more stringent security controls that are being asked for by insurers. Insurers are now calling out for EDR by name. They're not just, it used to be that they were asking for, well, do you have malware protection or do you have an AV and is it being updated often? That ask is now starting to be replaced with, do you have a centrally managed EDR solution? And having good malware defenses, it's less heartburn, fewer cold sweats, happier help desk and incident responders, especially if you have an EDR solution in play, because it just takes so much time and effort off of them to respond to a threat. And it can literally be the difference between a client being hit with a piece of malware that damages a client's endpoint in a way that they can't change their desktop background back to their kid's soccer photo, and now you've got a tech spending 20, 30, 40 minutes trying to fix that, whenever an EDR solution can just automate applying the remediation for you to get the endpoint back into its previous state. And this is another set of controls where there's a lot of universal agreement among all of the different frameworks that are being referenced today. And what they're asking for is, well, they're all asking that you use an anti-malware solution on all assets. And they're almost all of them are fairly explicit that the protection on all assets should be the same level and quality of protection as the rest of the environment. Because, well, when it comes to networked environments, whatever endpoint on that network with the weakest defenses is the weak link, and that is the one that will, if it's going to be compromised, it's most likely to be the one that's compromised. And there's a good question. So what about mobile devices, iPads, mobile phones? Yes, that's included here as well. iOS devices, you can maybe make the argument that through the use of Apple configuration profiles for iOS and iPhone devices, that you have proper mitigations in place by restricting what can be installed and downloaded off of the App Store and things like that. And that'll be something where we at Enable, we don't have anything there aside from like the Apple configuration profile control. We can provide you with that through Insight or InCentral, but we don't have a point solution for a AV product on mobile devices. Actually, I think all of them also have some language in them that says you need to auto update your anti-malware solution with definitions, or you need to update when available. So you're going to need, that's just saying you need a mechanism in place to make sure whatever you have for endpoint protection is being constantly updated as needed as soon as possible through automated means. And then restricting mobile media or removable media. This one is referenced in a few different ways. One is saying that you should disable autoplay. That is I believe it's the CIS controls say you should disable autoplay for removable devices. That's been disabled by default for a long time, but it's still something you need to monitor and manage. Other frameworks that were referenced today, they call out a little bit more explicitly to say, no, it's not just auto run. Any unauthorized external media should not be allowed to auto mount on devices. And that would be something you would tackle via InCentral or Insight if you want to kind of roll up your sleeves and put in some blanket disallow rules for auto mounting external media. But via EDR, with the device control that's available via EDR, you can get really, you can narrow that down to say, well, I'm going to disallow any external mass storage device from being mounted at my medical client, because nobody is supposed to be able to bring information into that medical client or take information out of that medical client's environment on an unapproved channel. That's represents opportunities for data exfiltration, for infiltration of malicious payloads, all kinds of things, and you want to stop that. That is an easy way of implementing that control via EDR. So data recovery, business continuity, and disaster recovery. So this is going to be one of those things where, depending on how your MSP is operated and the types of clients you've been serving, data recovery and business continuity may be completely different parts of your portfolio, or it may or business continuity may not even be part of your portfolio. But why is data recovery important? Well, it's going to be obvious for everybody here that you have to plan for resiliency, and having backups of data available for when everything goes wrong, that is a lifesaver. That is how you bail yourself out of, you and your clients, out of really bad situations. But Backups are a target for threat actors now. They will leverage them for both exfiltration purposes and to maximize the impact of an extortion attack or a ransomware attack by deleting your backups so you don't have them available to restore from. And having good data recovery processes in place doesn't just help with the fact that, okay, we've got the backup, but it's the RTOs and the RPOs that you're setting up that is supported by the documentation and processes. And this is a small observation I've made over many years with MSPs, is a lot of times the discussion is had around RTOs and RPOs for individual assets. So if this server goes down, here's our restore point objective, and here's our how long it's going to take us to get that server back up. And that's 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. Doesn't sound that bad. But not a lot of MSPs talk about it in relation to the totality of your entire business has been taken down. We have to rebuild you from scratch. And since we have to rebuild you from scratch, that means it is going to take us 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. We have all your data backed up and we can get you back. But because it was a total business event, it's going to take us many days to get you back up. And that's something that a lot of MSPs avoid having a conversation around because they're worried that their clients aren't going to like that they're not going to be happy with that level of service, which is perfectly fine. They may not be happy with it, but you've got to present it to them, let them know what it's going to take to get better than that. And then again, you're not accepting the risk for the client. You're letting them accept the risk for themselves by saying, you know what, it's fine. We can tolerate for being down that long because we can't afford to pay that type of money for cold standby, warm standby, hot standby, or failover. Or they can say, no, we are willing to throw money at it. Let's set up a hot site, and we're going to keep VMs on standby there on a 1 hour delay from production environment. And business continuity, even though I mentioned it here in low risk environments, it's not usually discussed in any of the controls. A lot of these will have mentions of it. For the Essential 8, it says, the guidance it gives is daily backups. For the Cyber Essentials, it's back up your data. It is that generic of a statement in there. But of course, some of the other ones in here are going to be much more detailed and explicit. But well, what are those common things they're asking for? Again, they're back to create and. So create and document your data and system recovery processes. So for every one of your asset types, what data is being backed up there? How do you restore that data? Where do you restore that data? Who's responsible for restoring that data? Defining the scope of data to be protected, because it is not as expensive as it used to be to make the statement, I'm going to back up all of your systems in there, and I'm going to make every one of those backups represent my capability of doing a bare metal restore. That used to be something that was almost unachievable to say, I'm going to do that for every endpoint in your environment. We're now have available to us better tools, better methodologies. That's not as preposterous of a stance to take, but whatever it ends up being, you still have to define that scope of what we are going to back up. Also, they're calling for backups to run weekly or more frequently based on desired RPOs. So this is another one of those, it's a fuzzy statement in almost all of the frameworks that says you need to decide how often you need to back up based on the environment, the data that's concerned here. But it shouldn't be any less often than once a week. I imagine most of our MSP partners that are here today that are using our Cove data protection, you're probably backing up at least once a day, if not multiple times a day, full system backups of devices, of workstations, of servers, of your M365, just because of the efficiencies of the product, because it is the way it's designed and the capabilities it has. You can afford to take that stance of we're going to back up everything, because it's just really ridiculously efficient at pushing a minimum amount of data over the wire. Protecting data at rest in backup with at least the same controls and protections as data at rest in production. So if the data at rest in your production environment requires that that data be stored with specific types of encryption or controls, then those same need to be applied or better in your backup solution. And there are almost all of them now are universally calling for maintaining backups of data isolated from production networks or offsite. It's about half and half, where they just say just it needs to be secured away from the production environment, and the others are saying secured offsite. So that'll be another one of those. You have to read the applicable framework for the vertical you're going to pursue. But this is a really important principle nowadays for backups, because of the way threat actors operate. You can't afford to leave your backups in the environment where an attacker can find them and then delete them. And Insight in Central, we've got capabilities there. Cove data protection, really good at helping you meet these control requirements. And I got quite a few comments of "we love Cove" in the questions panel, and that seems to be the sentiment. If you have not looked at our Cove backup solution, take a look, especially if you're still doing image-based backups. It can be a game changer and a significant, a significant change in either your costs or your margins that you can make with it. Network infrastructure. And this is mainly about firmware and secure design, but for but it's only going to be so much we're covering because we are addressing low risk environments. So, but why is network infrastructure important? Almost the entirety of a modern business's operations flows over network connections. And you want to secure networks to, of course, securing a network is one of the most effective ways of keeping bad actors out. Your network perimeter defenses, like firewalls or VPNs that are exposed out to the internet, those are your first line of defenses. They are there to keep threat actors from as far away from your internal assets as possible, and it does a very good job at reducing their effectiveness. Now you'll see here that now we're starting to get up into the higher security controls, that we're starting to see a few of our compliance standards and frameworks drop off, where they're not asking for these particular controls. So a few of these here, again, it is not that they don't want you to do these things, but some of these things they're not addressing until you get into their classification of medium risk. But what are the common ones in the low risk bracket? All of them are calling for keeping network infrastructure patched and on your most recent stable firmware options, and then also making sure that you're updating that monthly or more frequently. In Central and Insight, they can help out with this via SNMP checks against those types of devices, or if they are devices that were off of API, reaching into those, querying whatever that firmware version is, and setting it up to be a threshold violation for, if this version of go to the vendor, find and release firmware versions, put in the most recent version that you want your agents on, And then your service monitor will highlight the ones that do not have that up-to-date version. And then you can generate the help desk tickets off of that. You now have your work lined up for your engineers or technicians. And then there is network monitoring and defense, which is separate from network infrastructure. They make a point to distinguish between these two. So still though, it's still the same principles. Having good network monitoring is all about the fact that, well, all of your business operations are flowing through there. You need to secure access. You need to make sure that whatever is flowing across that network locally is safe and not transmitting malicious actions or allowing threat actors to make lateral movements. This is one of the first set of controls we're looking at, though, where none of our referenced frameworks are calling for you to do anything at the low risk level. Now, what kind of things are they asking for, though? Once you make the step up into medium risk, they start asking for things like intrusion detection systems and intrusion prevention systems, having network flow, or having other network security appliances or DLP, data loss prevention solutions, in play in the environments. But here for low risk, none of these frameworks that we're referencing today explicitly call out anything for network traffic monitoring. Cyber hygiene and security awareness training. Let's see, we got 10 minutes left. We're going to try and scooch through the rest of these slides, but I don't think we're going to make it before the end of the hour, so be prepared to probably tie this up around 3:05, 3:08. The security awareness training. So why is it important? End users can be either your best line of defense, your last line of defense, or even your worst line of defense. And this is just the nature of the human element. Some threats are going to be solvable with technology solutions, but a lot of them are going to have to be addressed through processes, standard operating procedures, and training, giving end users knowledge. It can be an easy profit generator. So from the business side of things, a security awareness training program is something you can build and develop and offer yourself, but the fastest way to get it done is to consume an already established security program from somebody that offers it and then resell it. And that can, again, it's not something you have to actively manage or implement or go in and keep up with. You'll set it up for your clients. They'll make sure that their employees are subscribing and taking those training courses. But you can take those results and communicate them back to the clients. Having good cybersecurity awareness training also, it demonstrates to clients you're taking the steps that are needed to help them better defend themselves. It can improve cooperation between clients, end users, and your team and your technicians and help desk. If they're using this security awareness training to train those end users how to interact, how to take advantage of the security services that you're offering. And again, this helps keep security in the forefront of communications with partners, having good cybersecurity awareness training. And it should be a part of your QBRs or for making proposals or improvements. If you see that you have a lot of really low scores on the cybersecurity awareness training around phishing or email, and then you also have business email compromises being a major concern for that client because they do wire transfers quite often, and they don't want to be the victim of that type of an attack. This can help you bring together that story about why you need to add in additional layers of protection if the client asks for it. So all of our frameworks call for this explicitly. The Essential 8, again, it doesn't have it as one of the mainline items, but you can easily consider it to be included in some of them as a sub item. But everybody else is asking for it from multiple levels. The HIPAA security rule has quite a few for it. The PCI DSS has quite a few for it because, and CGIS as well. And that's because in those environments, there are going to be a lot of employees touching, handling, and processing a lot of PII information in those environments. And the more PII and sensitive information is touched by the average user, the more security controls you're going to have to put in place to protect that data. So for our low risk environments, what's those common controls around security awareness training? Well, they're all asking that you create a security awareness program to be conducted at time of hire of new employees and annually or more frequently. Here at Enable, we do a little bit more frequent than that for our own security awareness training. But again, you don't have to build this yourself. You can purchase this as a ready-made service. All users are trained and informed on how to recognize and report social engineering attacks. Needs to be part of that training. All users are trained in best practices around MFA and credential management. Again, this is something where you're helping your clients, helping them practice good practices around passwords by providing them not only with the training, but also a password manager so it's easier for them to have those good habits. All users are trained on how to process, store, and destroy data based on their roles. What client information, what sensitive information are they privy to? How do they touch that information? How do they process that information? How do they destroy that information? Will be important for their training. All users are trained on the dangers of using non-work controlled networks. So the dangers of going out to a unprotected network at a cafe and using that free Wi-Fi to conduct really sensitive business. All users are trained on how to report non-compliant software or hardware based on in-support dates, incorrect versions of software, or missing updates. This is one of those challenges for MSPs with clients, especially whenever clients come in with the attitude of, I'm paying you all this money so I don't have to worry about this stuff. When in truth well, no, it needs to be that you're paying me all this money to help you manage your risks. And one of the things I'm going to do to help you manage your risks is train your employees on how to properly report whenever their devices or equipment is out of compliance with our security baselines. And all users are trained how to recognize and report potential incidents. This is all stuff that every one of the frameworks call for in some way, shape, or form. Service provider management. This is another set of security controls. It's important because, well, supply chain compromise, it's real, it's a thing, it's something we're very aware of in the MSP channel, but luckily it's not rampant, but it is still something you have to be concerned with. Also, with having good service provider management in place, you're going to know who to call, which can reduce incident response times. It'll also assist with knowing where data and business processes live and who's responsible for them. And that's going to be important because you cannot guarantee your client's experience with a third-party solution. You don't control it, you don't provision it, you're having to rely on that third party. But the more you know about that service provider, the more you can do to ensure reliable delivery of that third party's services to your clients. And you are this third party for your clients from their point of view. So you, as the MSP, you're going to have your service provider management for who you consume third-party services from, and your clients, they're going to need theirs. And this is one of the controls where it's kind of a little scattered on who is asking for it and who is not. You'll see that Essential 8 and the HIPAA security rules don't really speak to it, but all the other ones do. And what is that common thing they are asking for, though, in the low risk environments is that you simply just create and maintain a list of third-party service providers that process, store, or transmit data or provide critical business functions. Who they are, what they're responsible for, contact information, all of that stuff that you need, maybe your request for proposals from them, getting, whatever information you think you need to have on those service providers. An MSP Manager and Passportal from us here at Enable, those are great locations to store that kind of information. Application security. So this is more for larger environments. So we're not going to have a lot to talk about here because normally in small environments, you're not developing custom applications and solutions. But whenever you are developing applications, they have to be as secure as the environment and their use case dictates. In-house developed applications, they're always going to have vulnerabilities, just like applications from any other software vendor will. So having good application security practices internally is going to reduce the chances that you're introducing vulnerabilities and security concerns unnecessarily. In-house developed applications, API, or software solutions, again, they're unlikely to be found in low-risk environments in smaller businesses. So this is one of those groups of security controls that not a lot of MSPs are actually going to have to be concerned with. And you'll see here that for every single one of our referenced frameworks today, they're not mentioning it outright anywhere about application security because they're going to consider that a whole different field of cybersecurity and secure software design. Incident response management. Why is it important? Well, you never want to have to figure out during the middle of an emergency what you should do. And having a good documented incident response plan and supporting materials that can help improve your mean time to resolution by reducing your discovery time and fact finding that has to be performed in response to an incident. You do not want your technicians having to figure out during the middle of a ransomware event, do I turn off the computers or do I isolate them on the network in response to ransomware? How much of the client environment do I bring down? Again, that is not a question you want to figure out in the heat of the moment. You already need that answer written down somewhere so that your technicians and your engineers and everybody knows that this is the process. Knowing who is responsible for what can reduce redundant efforts during incident responses. Why waste your time and your resources and your money whenever an insurance claim is going to have to be filed and the insurer is going to bring in their own incident response team to perform some of this work? You need to know where that overlap is, where your responsibilities end and the responsibilities of an incident responder coming in via an insurer begins. And this also gives legal counsel time to weigh in with contract language, statements of work, and anything else prior to an incident. Your client has something going wrong at 7 o'clock on a Friday afternoon and things are starting to get a little bit angsty and you want some legal backup. You don't want to have to pay for those after-hour consultation calls with your lawyer if you can help it. So having these incident response, again, well documented, laid out, you get all kinds of additional benefits from them, more so than just the security side. You'll see here, again, most of our references will speak to it. Essential 8 and cybersecurity and cyber essentials, they don't speak to it strongly or directly. So there are little outliers here. And well, what are the common controls again for the low risk environment? They're all going to ask for, again, create and maintain a list of roles with the associated responsibilities and who is assigned to those roles. That's going to be part of your incident response. One person and one backup need to be designated as an incident manager responsible for orchestrating the response to an incident. And for your clients, that's probably going to be, you're going to have one lead person for all incident response. That might be you, it might not. And then you probably are going to have your backups be designated based on, well, who has the most familiarity with that client. Create and maintain contact information for all parties that need to be aware of or involved in an incident response. So that's going to be your insurance provider or the case manager, Secretary of State, or the DHH or DHHS if it's a medical client and there's a data breach and patient records are exposed and you have to go report that data breach. And also making sure you have a documented process in place for users to report security incidents. So we have our security awareness training previously that tells our clients, users, that they should report security incidents. And this backs that up by having that defined process in place for them to do it. And again, this is going to be more process heavy, more documentation and design of services heavy than just throwing an individual tool at it to get a result. MSP Manager and Passport are going to be good for this because of their documentation capabilities. And then the last set of controls we're going to be talking about is going to be penetration testing. So why is it important? You can't fix what you don't know about, and penetration testing brings an entire new set of capabilities that you're probably lacking on your teams. Engaging with an external pen tester, or not even external, but just an outside pen tester that's going to perform the pen testing for you, you're availing yourself of skills, capabilities, and experience you otherwise would not be able to tap into. This can also satisfy a little bit of the who watches the watchers concerns that your clients may have. It's having penetration testing is useful for proving to clients that not only do you have a record of addressing and fixing problems as they're discovered, but that you're actively looking for misconfigurations and vulnerabilities in the environment that need to be addressed, rather than just trying to maintain a status quo to get a recurring payment in. This will make your clients and you more resilient by finding things that you miss, things that your technicians or your engineers don't have the experience with or the knowledge or forethought to catch that a pen tester might. Also, penetration testing is required for certain audited standards. And pen tests, honestly, they should represent an opportunity, a revenue opportunity for you. They shouldn't be a sunken cost. You can have the ability to charge for the pen test itself, but also for the remediation of any discovered vulnerabilities as well. And this is another one of our frameworks. This is another one of our set of controls that is not called for at all in low risk environments. None of the standards or frameworks we were referencing outright say you should do pen testing in a low risk environment. Now, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. It is a revenue generator after all. But simply, if we're going by the frameworks, they say we don't need it. All right, everybody. Again, thanks for joining us today. Have a good rest of your afternoon.